Well, good morning, species value nature system. I'll talk to you about no taxation without representation, the depths of that, and with its relationship to northern slavery, and with its relationship to tactical, not just pseudo-education, but multi-front pseudo-education, conceived as a method to shared, standardized, tactically pseudo-education, self-defended, self-maintained, and with the organized crime method that used black and white as a fact treatment racket tool to keep the slavery that was against everyone unaddressed then, and now it was for a long-term breaching method. They knew that nations would come out of this in phases. We fell to this too, but last. That's how we had slavery still entrenched in the North right up to the last battle of the Revolutionary War. This is why George Washington had to leave in Hartford, Connecticut, Wethersfield, Connecticut. Slavery entrenched in the North. Could only semi-counter-extort it right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War. See, we have a tactically ulterior from actual value nature system defended. We have not the law defended, the nature of the law, but we have the body of the law defended as victim predators, only let realized branches. These are how they were originally motivated to sick roles with that as predatory comparison nature, which is ulterior from correlation nature, which is a big, huge difference because our nature is the correlation nature as value. And that's the value of English about space nature. And this is the course, space nature's course. It's only simultaneously of value, finite, radical body of metaphysical value correlation nature, value, which is positive or negative. This is the value of the cross. Cipher, because they knew they were going to be handing the religions to already, before the times of the messengers, tactically, criminally re-engineered ancient internation science and in relationship to our nature, and categorically. In other words, the lessons of it, because this is what God looks like. 2+ symbols with a question mark in between it as value here, which is positive or negative to the identity of space. That's why it's a question mark. That's the active phase. The finite phase to God, the bond to matter. No, once that goes away, there's no negative value nature, is there? Because there's only positive value nature coming through it. So it's to be indifferent to negative value nature, or try to make negative out of positive, still negative, or there is to try to discern the value of identity. That is of progressive value. That positive values is a tool in the expansion of with negative value nature, which is the identity of space, which is in conjunction with and as the temporary value nature of the shared sequence nature of space. Like all the gears of a clock, all the identities of value of each of its gears are in a distinct sequence nature, sharing one as shared value overall, right to left. And left to right, they are distinct. Like our cells, each cell has a distinct sequence nature, an identity of value, but it also extends beyond their own cell and beyond the ones they connect to immediately with the shared sequence nature. I'm not even a doctor. Each of the sciences, just being English, I'm an expert on the nature of English grammar as an identity of value discernment system. That's why Adam is the subject and Eve is the verb. And we're going to show how about predicate value, which is always inherently, actively, and progressively positive, is a positive relationship to itself. And predicate act value in relationship to criminal enterprises. Now, see, this is an organized crime conversation that modern nations were tactically only realized as us defending other and incapable of quality of fact treatment nature to counter what is recorded having tactically manifest a database relationship, a criminal database relationship, a breaching method tied to fact treatment natures to all areas. And see, this is what made our founders had to hide their roles with the Constitutional Convention, not just from abroad, but from people here, the fact treatment nature, only let realized, tactically pseudo-educated. So we have to care, in this conversation for treatment ourselves, we have to care for the correlation nature. The value, what we are, not, in other words, when we look at the cities and things like that and say, oh, that's the system, no one's going to do anything, look at that, that's how it's been. That's why we're a very young nation that began with this obligation to address the zoning laws, rules, to address rhetoric, pseudo-rhetoric. We're going to have to make the distinction between pseudo-rhetoric and rhetoric and the nature of the law. See, we have fact treatment rackets that everyone was like in a boxing fight. This was to tire us out in the fact treatment nature field, and to invest everyone into roles, blaming on other and on others, the breaching method. So we only realized Oz breach standards relationship to all points, and that measured Oz. So we have agencies that have worse than criminal incompetence and pseudo-sophistication, with each science recorded. In other words, with the law in relationship to a predicate value, predicate act value. See, each of the sciences are criminally influenced to lean on others, not correlation nature. For example, too, this is critical. When President Obama, which we're very lucky to have, uncommonly great guy, and too, that's disgusting. The Italian guy. Well, see, this is what I'm trying to say. That wasn't honest prejudice. Before Obama went in office, it was an Italian guy in New York City. See, each of the cultures, each single one of the cultures, is tied to what forced all modern nations to roles with a forced tactically criminally sick markets positions, forced shared police, and that forced shared not told about. Because how are you going to police the markets if you're telling on your own police? So they're undercover. But then this wasn't as manifest as a nature exploiting itself with and as a method of breaching organized crime that is maintaining them doing that in to all spots as sophistication only in comparison to nature to us believed and forced only tactically pseudo-education, regular sciences, and time and positions and roles with database rackets already set up against people for the people in power, only realized victim predator roles realized, reliant upon needs to cover live progressions, exploiting database crime method recorded, where they're stacking through time. People on campuses don't realize what's being typed into databases about their kids and about themselves and about the elderly, about there's some, just like with poverty too. Poverty with the urban areas and poverty with the fact treatment natures tied to elderly homes in the suburbs. We're going to do this simultaneously. And there's no prejudice. Prejudice, when that's a conviction, that's a victim predator. So we're going to stay on where the victim is. In other words, no taxation without representation. In other words, this is not personal, but they make it personal. In other words, America didn't invent the car, and this is huge. This is critical, because the Jewish people, like you say Jew, and it sounds like it's Jew. Everyone our nations have a shared enemy, and Hitler, and George Washington, who had to leave this entrenched in Connecticut with slavery, and as a fact treatment racket. In other words, calling freedom a contrast to the Civil War, which was a relationship of multi-front entrenched by one crime method, victim, predator, fact treatment nature roles, North and South. Everybody, every color, because that's the only education that realized, tactically, pseudo, then justified. And justified ulterior from the sophistication originally gained by nature's course, which is the only one inherently, actively, and progressively value at the same time. And we can see this as a clear body of value, and to also manifest in the active phase distinctly. This is why there's three natures of zero that repeat. Well, the English was revealed to teach this. Alpha and Omega is about correlation. It's about polarity nature, because they're attached to and has the value of correlation nature, which has a relationship to itself, a radical correlation relationship to itself. That science was tactically, criminally re-engineered to worse than obfuscate. This is the cause of evolution. When we are identity that is positive to the overall system, to the actively, inherently at the same time. As a value nature system, where value nature is in relationship to an identity, with the identity of space has needs for ourselves, for our bodies, as a shared sequence nature, as the value of the shared sequence nature to it. Everything that is temporary value, in other words, the Big Bang Theory, no matter how small you make the particle, that particle had to be generated by something. And this is what Genesis is about, because this was what the ancients revealed before criminal re-engineering of internation sciences. And with the Quran and the Old Testament are multi-front saying too, is like in the beginning of the Quran, when Cain and Abel are talking about, what's value nature, what is positive to the self, the group, and overall the value of our species. As long as you have the nature of the law cared about first, then you're all right. Then that's the nature that forces evolution. And what that is, so you have to do it from, in other words, the value of the Campus Marcius originally was a value, because we understood this because it was valued not by itself, because it was only a correlation nature, consciously, positive or negative value nature, consciously maintaining, trying to understand how to be positive value nature more, not towards emotions and sensibilities. For example, I never read Jane Austen, but I know it's about Sense and Sensibility, that book. We'll examine how correlation, that sense and sensibilities were a topic, because there was natures of juxtaposed. There were natures of juxtaposed criminal insidiousness nature upon the nations. That was tactically knowing they wouldn't have the sophistication of the law, and they would have knowledge of the law, people preventing, worse than obfuscating that, and understanding that, and how to deal and explain. So what caused slavery was a crime method that understood and learned about slavery before those physical, overt natures of it were used tactically. Internation for an inter-internation species fact treatment nature breaching method. So they, by tactically, criminally re-engineering what the ancients understood about fact treatment nature, and then saw fact treatment justifications. You see what I'm saying? So we have math, the law, we have each science with physical delusions associated with the reception and with the sense and sensibilities of all podiums, and in defense of a pseudo-positive that is with and as the nature of criminal insidiousness, a theater that has convictions that need to be demonstrated, needing to justified by styles needing to hide lies, delusions, premises, and reliant upon categorically recorded physical delusion propagating and ill conviction natures, sciences. So when people, for example, when people say forget the past, there's nothing we can do about the past. We have the past, when we have the past tactically attached to summary convictions that are wrong. In other words, too, George had to use the French general to counter-extort, to semi-counter-extort what was already entrenched in the South, in the North, and with fact treatment nature, and through the sciences. And areas maintained that way first. They built the criminal insidiousness nature. Even the Native Americans, they took their education. So they took their fact treatment nature, tactically, not just to do that, leave them the drum. And leave us all the drum. And obligations by our founders, no taxation without representation. This does not evolve. We must understand evolution. See, they can't speak their points about evolution without hiding lies, delusions, premises, criminal intonation, persuasions, forced reliance, multi-front, to the same ends, convictions regarding the integrity of science together and individually. There was none in many contexts, and we don't have that addressed. That's recorded too. So we don't have legal representation. We have worse than the illusion of that. We have victim predator. We have overt predator, litigation nature, voices, natures, and souls only are heard. Physical delusion propagating each age of campus, and connections maintaining this only let realized. See, inventing the machinery that was the assembly line and all that for cars and stuff is completely distinct from inventing the car, which the Germans did. But even that, Otto Crater, we don't know if they did that. In other words, we have a shared enemy. Germany, every religion. You say, how could Germany, when the Jews and all that? That was areas maintained. At the same time, top-down maintained. And through the sciences, areas maintained. So it was with all body of value treatments. Hurt reaction natures. In other words, George Washington had to agree with the French to counter what they would have to counter, because they were playing French even kings. If you use correlation, they were extorted bodies, extorted fact treatment natures. Now, worse than that, and forced to react to it and justify that. So as the quality of abridged fact treatment nature, tactically. So without addressing that, in other words, there was that extortion. They had to agree to fight what we went to Germany, war with Germany against, which they didn't understand being victim predators of either. With Joseph Mengele, this medical corruption, originally and progressed tied to courts, with psychology, recorded physical delusion propagating. I'm not a doctor, but we'll demonstrate. English is about correlation, and that's just how the sciences share an identity, which predicate act value caused by in relation criminal enterprises and their criminal insidious natures and acts like predicate acts. They're inherently, actively, and progressively negative value nature, relationship to itself. Just like our body has a temperance that is beyond our control, the range in nature of positive, just like our metaphysical nature does. It's space nature's identity beyond all this, as the identity beyond all ourselves, but still ours. It has a nature and temperance that will not go beyond, inherently and progressively. So that middle plus, that middle question mark, this is going to be used to. English was revealed to teach about the Trinity. It was also revealed to teach about Allah, which is the identity of space. Per science, each of the letters, alpha, longs. The Quran doesn't say this, but this is what English science is. Alpha longs, long alpha's high. Value AH isn't. We'll learn about the letters, but as value, as values, and as value nature distinctly. And then this is, of course, about the difference between what causes and is the nature of negative value nature. What causes it. And what happens with it is constantly, as it's being, it's lethal. It's the value of lethal of hadith for space nature transfer. Because the identity of space will only keep positive value nature inherently, actively, and progressively value to itself in relationship to its roles and uses of immediate space nature Earth, with no criminal internation persuasions, the rest of nature, as a volume of quality of diffusion of consciousness, as a nature that is ours, but it's also in every body it's in, with and as the same needs, nature, and wants. So we're going to so you siphon the water, and then it just keeps coming down and fills up a dam, and at a pace faster than it can go through the pipes at the bottom, and that spins generators, and that makes that energy for the Nevada, for Las Vegas. It's a lot of energy. That's how you do with Puerto Rico. But the way we haven't done this is in relationship to tactically defended, but not and how defended value nature system, ulterior from actual value nature system by spaces system, tactically ulterior to that invested positions in relationship to the money and treatments of human nature. Actually, not when it comes down. Last second, they were set up by the whole time was waving the flags and stuff like that. Victim fact, treatment, nature, predators, per internation science, tactical pseudo-education, and that's attached to convictions, with personally, formally, business-wise, all areas maintained, then that, and then areas maintained again, per archetypal criminal enterprise, the devil. This is not just opinion. This is not theory. Not just theory. It's not just theory. This is with not only recorded proofs, but recorded proofs of the recorded proofs being hid with evidence as crimes. Evidence database, illusion stacking, intercampus, with areas like through witness fabrications and stuff like that, and with the courts through time. They've been stacked, and with prisons, media databases, treatments of stories and stuff like that, faking both sides of stories. Well, it's president saying fake news. You report the recorded, but they're recording other than just doing other. This is also tied to their treatments of ISIS, because there was, is, an internation, fake sides, to the maintenance of its nature only that realized already having exploited that to all areas, as they only let realize legal nature voices. You see, so we have police force still juxtaposed with internation family police, and that per them, and per recorded proofs, like with the Trade Center too attack, witness fabrications, and tied in court sequence shifts interstate with that context, with the Ninth Circuit next to the Trade Center in that context, with in a case tied to where the former director of FBI was a defendant, and with federal criminals who had recorded and confessed drug crime rules, then and actively and progressively with people who, one of his co-defendants with federal criminals had a daughter in my grade, and then they had other a guy who lived on Dearborn Street, another like a pension thief and stuff like that. But when I was in school too, those guys hadn't been revealed as that yet, and they were there, and my father was against them in a union speech. But what they did, they wouldn't let him talk because it was juxtaposed with other police forms too, recorded criminally involved with what was his internation criminal enterprises, overt, unrealized, and within that is the nature of legalized criminal and citizen's nature justifying itself, and how it is criminally legalized that way. As a pseudo-sophistication only compares to nature in relationship to tactically pseudo-educated books, standardized education. This is why it's important to have standardized education, but also as in a correlation nature. Also not, perfecting itself, not per sensibilities in relation within that, because these are sensibilities with treatments of black and white and counters to it that are recorded roles as was set up to be. In other words, justifications of that are quality of abridged factory nature. You figure out, use correlation, you figure out who wrote those things on the for example, the other day there was some kind of general or whatever talking about school. Someone wrote black things against people, to hurt their fact treatment nature. And to hurt the fact treatment nature. See, now what you do with that is not, you figure out what happened, but you don't just stop there. Because before someone did that, they were tactically pseudo-educated. You don't go into the to the Air Force and then do something like that unless you're a victim predator or something recorded more insidious and recorded uncharged and recorded worse than that, blamed on other and blamed on others. So we have fast chop rules and fake fraudulent fact treatment nature's courts to all areas in relationship to only realized uncharged trained justifications of that, and then reliance upon that training as excuse natures further cultivated personally, groups, misprision and top down, with the markets forced and the forced sharing the nature of justifications of that, and theater with that. And everyone, in other words, with the reason, there's reason that they can only agree to teach about morality as peace, as pseudo-peace. And then they're like taking that personal and stuff like that, because they won't deal with acts and with sequence, which reveals all means with correlation nature. So what we do is we use all the space that we're going to take to spread out the siphoning of the water of the river, which is then just going to drip right back into it with the hydroelectric, and then all areas own this, because we're gonna science reveals that Our zoning laws were uncharged. Our books are uncharged. Our much is all victim predator roles. In other words, we're not only going to claim these bottoms, but worse than bottom. We're trapped. The identity of positive value nature is trapped in negative value nature. But it will never be that. And it will keep demonstrating these negative value nature progressions. And the more it's blamed on other and on others, the more they stack human life in jails, the more human life connected to it immediately, and all of us are connected to it, the more the nature manifest demonstration, negative value nature progressions, lethal hadiths. Now, space nature's course returns, campus Marcius, yes, who learns? No taxation without representation. They're also using time as a weapon to hide from voices that can reveal this in time. They're trying to make with the debt, in other words. So we might have, and with Detroit tied to it. See, there's criminality associated with the treatments of the car, and associated to what France was forced to ally with George Washington, and George Washington was forced to ally with France, but not per the nature that is actually ours. They were both extorted by the same thing, but not, in other words, the counter against it with Germany, and that's how Connecticut made the biggest move, right? This is why George Washington had to come to Connecticut and could only counter extort. And then they led everyone into World War I.